The Dharma Bombs. Chapter 8. Now another incredible delay was caused as Mr. Morley decided to see if he could find a store open in Bridgeport and buy a sleeping bag or at least a canvas cover or tarpaulin of some kind for tonight's sleep at 9,000 feet, and judging from last night's sleep at 4,000, it was bound to be pretty cold. Meanwhile, Jaffe and I waited, sitting in the now hot sun of 10 a.m. on the grass of the school, watching occasional laconic traffic pass by on a not busy highway, and watching to see the fortunes of a young Indian hitchhiker pointed north. We discussed him warmly. That's what I like, hitchhiking around, feeling free. Imagine, though, being an Indian and doing all that. Damn it, Smith, let's go talk to him and wish him luck. The Indian wasn't very talkative, but not unfriendly, and told us he'd been making pretty slow time on 395. We wished him luck. Meanwhile, in the very tiny town, Morley was nowhere to be seen. What's he doing, waking up some proprietor in his bed back there? Finally, Morley came back and said there was nothing available, and the only thing to do was to borrow a couple of blankets at the lake lodge. We got in the car, went back down the highway a few hundred yards, and turned south toward the glittering trackless snows high in the blue air. We drove along beautiful twin lakes, and came to the lake lodge, which was a big white farmhouse inn. Morley went in and deposited $5 for the use of 2 blankets for one night. A woman was standing in the doorway, arms akimbo. Dogs barked. The road was dusty, a dirt road, but the lake was cerulean, pure. In it the reflections of the cliffs and foothills showed perfectly. But the road was being repaired, and we could see yellow dust boiling up ahead, where we'd have to walk along the lake road a while before cutting across a creek at the end of the lake and up through underbrush and up the beginning of the trail. We parked the car and got all our gear out and arranged it in the warm sun. Jaffe put things in my knapsack and told me I had to carry it or jump in the lake. He was being very serious and leaderly, and it pleased me more than anything else. Then, with the same boyish gravity, he went over to the dust of the road with the pickaxe and drew a big circle and began drawing things in the circle. What's that? I'm doing a magic mandala that'll not only help us on our climb, but after a few more marks and chants I'll be able to predict the future from it. What's a mandala? They're the Buddhist designs that are always circles filled with things. The circle represents the void and the thing's illusion. See? You sometimes see mandalas painted over the bodhisattva's head and can tell his story from studying it. Tibetan in origin. I had on the tennis sneakers, and now I whipped out my mountain climbing cap for the day, which Jaffe had consigned to me, which was a little black French beret, which I put on at a jaunty angle and hitched the knapsack up, and I was ready to go. In the sneakers and the beret I felt more like a bohemian painter than a mountain climber. But Jaffe had on his fine big boots and his little green Swiss cap with feather, and looked elfin but rugged. I see the picture of him alone in the mountains in that outfit. The vision, it's pure morning in the high dry Sierras. Far off, clean firs can be seen shadowing the sides of Rocky Hill. Further yet, snow-capped pinpoints. Nearer, the big bushy forms of pines, and there's Jaffe in his little cap, with a big rucksack on his back, clumping along, but with a flower in his left hand, which is hooked to the strap of the rucksack at his breast. Grass grows out between crowded rocks and boulders. Distant sweeps of scree can be seen making gashes down the sides of morning. His eyes shine with joy. He's on his way. His heroes are John Muir and Han Shan and Shea T and Lipo and John Burroughs and Paul Bunyan and Kropotkin. He's small and has a funny kind of belly coming out as he strides. But it's not because his belly is big, it's because his spine curves a bit. But that's offset by the vigorous long steps he takes, actually the long steps of a tall man, as I found out following him up trail. And his chest is deep and shoulders broad. God dang it, Jaffy, I feel great this morning, I said as we locked the car and all three of us started swinging down the lake road with our packs, straggling a bit, occupying side and center and other side of the road like straggling infantrymen. Isn't this a hell of a lot greater than the place? Getting drunk in there on a fresh Saturday morning like this, all bleary and sick, and here we are by the fresh, pure lake, walking along in the good air. By God, it's a haiku in itself. Comparisons are odious, Smith, he sent sailing back to me, quoting Cervantes and making a Zen Buddhist observation to boot. It don't make a damn friggin' difference whether you're in the place or hiking up Matterhorn. It's all the same old void, boy. And I mused about that and realized he was right. Comparisons are odious. It's all the same, but it sure felt great, and suddenly I realized this, in spite of my swollen foot veins, would do me a lot of good and get me away from drinking and maybe make me appreciate, perhaps, a whole new way of living. Jaffy, I'm glad I met you. I'm going to learn all about how to pack rucksacks and what to do and hide in these mountains when I'm sick of civilization. In fact, I'm grateful I met you. Well, Smith, I'm grateful I met you too, learning about how to write spontaneously and all that. Ah, that's nothing. To me, it's a lot. Let's go, boys. A little faster. We ain't got no time to waste. By and by, we reached the boiling yellow dust where caterpillars were churning around and great big fat sweaty operators, who didn't even look at us, were swearing and cussing on the job. For them to climb a mountain, you'd have to pay them double time and quadruple time today, Saturday. Jaffa and I laughed to think of it. I felt a little embarrassed with my silly beret, but the cat operators didn't even look, and soon we left them behind and were approaching the final little store lodge at the foot of the trail. It was a log cabin set right on the end of the lake, and it was enclosed in a V of pretty big foothills. Here we stopped and rested a while on the steps. We'd hiked approximately 4 miles, but on flat good road, and went in and bought candy and crackers and cokes and stuff. Then, suddenly, Morley, who'd not been silent on the 4-mile hike and looked funny in his own outfit, which was that immense backboard with air mattress and all, deflated now, and no hat at all, so that he looked just like he does in the library, but with big floppy pants of some kind. Morley suddenly remembered he'd forgotten to drain the crankcase. So he forgot to drain the crankcase, I said, noticing their consternation and not knowing much about cars. So he forgot to brain the drank base. No, this means that if he gets below freezing tonight, down here the goddamn radiator explodes and we can't drive back home and have to walk 12 miles to Bridgeport and get all hung up. Well, maybe it won't be so cold tonight. Can't take a chance, said Morley, and by that time I was pretty mad at him for finding more ways than he could figure to forget. foul up, disturb, delay, and make go round in circles this relatively simple hiking trip we'd undertaken. What you gonna do? What we gonna do? Walk back 4 miles? Only thing to do. I'll walk back alone. Drain the crankcase. Walk back and follow you up the trail and meet you tonight at the camp. And I'll light a big bonfire, said Jaffe, and you'll see the glow, and just yodel, and we'll direct you in. That's simple. But you've got to step on it to make it by nightfall at camp. I will. I'll start back right now. But then I felt sorry about poor old hapless Funny Henry and said, "Ah, hell, you mean you're not going to climb with us today? The hell with the crankcase. Come on with us." It'd cost too much money if that thing froze tonight, Smith. No, I think I better go back. I've got plenty of nice thoughts to keep me acquainted with, probably, what you two'll be talking about all day. Oh, hell, I'll just start back right now. Be sure not to roar at bees, and don't hurt the cur, and if the tennis party comes on with everybody shirtless, don't make eyes at the searchlight, or the sun'll kick a girl's ass right back at you, cats and all, and boxes of fruit and oranges thrown in, and some such statement, with no ado or ceremony. There we went down the road, with just a little hand-wave, muttering and talking on to himself. So we had to yell, "Well, so long, Henry, hurry up." And he didn't answer, but just walked off, shrugging. "You know," I said, "I think it doesn't make any difference to him anyway. He's just satisfied to wander around and forget things, and pat his belly and look at things as they are, sort of like a schwankst, a schwank-see." And Jaffe and I had a good laugh watching forlorn Henry swaggering down all that road we'd only just negotiated, alone and mad. "Well, here we go," said Jaffe. "When I get tired of this big rucksack, we'll swap. I'm ready now. Man, come on, give it to me now. I feel like carrying something heavy. You won't realize how good I feel. You don't. Man, come on." So we swapped packs and started off. Both of us were feeling fine, and we're talking a blue streak about anything, literature, the mountains, girls, Princess, the poets, Japan, our past adventures in life, and I suddenly realized it was a kind of blessing in disguise. Morley had forgotten to drain the crankcase, otherwise Jaffe wouldn't have got in a word edgewise all the blessed day, and now I had a chance to hear his ideas. In the way he did things, hiking, he reminded me of Mike, my boyhood chum, who also loved to lead the way. Real grave, like Buck Jones, eyes to the distant horizons, like Natty Bumppo, cautioning me about snapping twigs, or "It's too deep here. Let's go down the creek a ways to ford it," or "There'll be mud in that low bottom. We better skirt around." And dead serious and glad, I saw all Jaffe's boyhood in those eastern Oregon forests, the way he went about it. He walked like he talked, from behind. I could see his toes pointed slightly inward, the way mine do, instead of out. And when it came time to climb, he pointed his toes out, like Chaplin, to make a kind of easier flap-wap as he trudged. We went across a kind of muddy river bottom, through dense undergrowth and a few willow trees, and came out on the other side, a little wet, and started up the trail, which was clearly marked and named, and had been recently repaired by trail crews. But as we hit parts where a rock had rolled on the trail, he took great precaution to throw the rock off, saying, "I used to work on trail crews. I can see a trail all meddlesome like that, Smith, as we climbed, the lake began to appear below us, and suddenly, in its clear blue, we could see the deep holes where the lake had its springs. Like black wells, we could see schools of fish skitter. Oh, this is like an early morning in China, and I'm 5 years old in beginningless time. I sang out and felt like sitting by the trail and whipping out of my little notebook and writing sketches about it. Look over there, sang Jaffe. Yellow aspens. Just put me in the mind of a haiku, talking about the literary life, the yellow aspens. Walking in this country, you could understand the perfect gems of haikus the Oriental poets had written. Never getting drunk in the mountains or anything, but just going along as fresh as children, writing down what they saw without literary devices or fanciness of expression. We made up haikus as we climbed, winding up and up now on the slopes of brush. Rocks on the side of the cliff, I said. Why don't they tumble down? Maybe that's a haiku, maybe not. It might be a little too complicated, said Jaffe. A real haiku's gotta be as simple as porridge, and yet make you see the real thing. Like the greatest haiku of them all, probably, is the one that goes, the sparrow hops along the veranda with wet feet, by Shiki. You see the wet footprints like a vision in your mind, and yet in those few words you also see all the rain that's been falling that day, and almost smell the wet pine needles. Let's have another. I'll make up one of my own this time. Let's see. Lake below, the black holes, the wells make... No, that's not a haiku, goddammit. You never can be too careful about haiku. How about making them up real fast as you go along, spontaneously? Look here, he cried happily. Mountain lupin. See the delicate blue color those little flowers have? And here's some California red poppy over there. The whole meadow is just powdered with color. Up there, by the way, is a genuine California white pine. You never see them much anymore. You sure know a lot about birds and trees and stuff. I've studied it all my life. Then, also, as we went on climbing, we began getting more casual and making funnier, sillier talk, and pretty soon we got to a bend in the trail where it was suddenly glady and dark with shade, and a tremendous cataracting stream was bashing and frothing over scummy rocks and tumbling on down, and over the stream was a perfect bridge formed by a fallen snag. We got on it and lay belly down and dunked our heads down, hair wet, and drank deep as the water splashed in our faces, like sticking your head by the jet of a dam. I lay there a good long minute enjoying the sudden coolness. This is like an advertisement for Rainier Ale, yelled Jaffe. Let's sit a while and enjoy it. Boy, you don't know how far we got to go yet. Well, I'm not tired. Well, you'll be, Tiger. Chapter 9. We went on, and I was immensely pleased with the way the trail had a kind of immortal look to it in the early afternoon, now the way the side of the grassy hill seemed to be clouded with ancient gold dust, and the bugs flipped over rocks, and the wind sighed in shimmering dances over the hot rocks, and the way the trail would suddenly come into a cool shady part with big trees overhead, and here the light deeper, and the way the lake below us soon became a toy lake with those black well holes perfectly visible still, and the giant cloud chattels on the lake, and the tragic little road winding away where poor Morley was walking back. Can you see Morley down there? Jaffe took a long look. I can see a little cloud of dust. Maybe that's him coming back already. But it seemed that I had seen the ancient afternoon of the trail From meadow rocks and lupine posies to sudden revisits with the roaring stream with its splash snag bridges and undersea greennesses, there was something inexpressibly broken in my heart, as though I'd lived before and walked this trail, under similar circumstances, with a fellow bodhisattva, but, maybe, on a more important journey. I felt like lying down by the side of the trail and remembering it all. The woods do that to you. They always look familiar, long lost, like the face of a long dead relative, like an old dream, like a piece of forgotten song drifting across the water, most of all like golden eternities of past childhood or past manhood, and all the living and dying and the heartbreak that went on 1,000,000 years ago, and the clouds, as they pass overhead, seem to testify, by their own lonesome familiarity, to this feeling. Ecstasy. Even I felt with flashes of sudden remembrance, and feeling sweaty and drowsy. I felt like sleeping and dreaming in the grass. As we got higher, we got more tired, and now, like two true mountain climbers, we weren't talking anymore, and didn't have to talk, and were glad, in fact. Jaffe mentioned that, turning to me after a half-hour's silence. This is the way I like it. When you get going, there's just no need to talk, as if we were animals and just communicated by silent telepathy. So, huddled in our own thoughts, we tromped on, Jaffe using the Gazotsky trudge I mentioned, and myself finding my own true step, which was short steps, slowly, patiently, going up the mountain at 1 mile an hour. So I was always 30 yards behind him, and when we had any haikus now, we'd yell them fore and aft. Pretty soon we got to the top of the part of the trail that was a trail no more, to the incomparable dreamy meadow, which had a beautiful pond, and after that it was boulders and nothing but boulders. Only sign we have now to know which way we're going is ducks. What ducks? See those boulders over there? See those boulders over there? Why, god damn, man. I see 5 miles of boulders leading up to that mountain. See the little pile of rocks on that near boulder there, by the pine? That's a duck, put up by other climbers. Maybe that's one I put up myself in '54. I'm not sure. We just go from boulder to boulder from now on, keeping a sharp eye for ducks. Then we get a general idea how to wraggle along. Although, of course, we know which way we're going. That big cliff face up there is where our plateau is. Plateau? My God, you mean that ain't the top of the mountain? Of course not. After that we got a plateau, and then a scree, and some more rocks, and we get to a final alpine lake, no bigger'n this pond, and then comes the final climb, over 1,000 feet, almost straight up, boy, to the top of the world, where you can see all California and parts of Nevada, and the wind'll blow right through your pants. Oh, how long does it all take? While the only thing we can expect to make tonight is our camp up there on the plateau. I call it a plateau. It ain't that at all. It's a shelf between heights. But the top and the end of the trail was such a beautiful spot. I said, boy, look at this. A dreamy meadow, pines at one end, the pond and clear fresh air, and the afternoon clouds rushing golden. Why don't we just sleep here tonight? I don't think I've ever seen a more beautiful park. Ah, this is nowhere. It's great, of course, but we might wake up tomorrow morning and find 3 dozen school teachers on horseback frying bacon in our backyard. Where we're going, you can bet your ass there won't be one human being. And if there is, I'll be a spotted horse's ass. or maybe just one mountain climber or two. But I don't expect so at this time of year. You know the snow's about to come here any time now. If it comes tonight, it's goodbye me and you. Well, goodbye, Jaffy. But let's rest here and drink some water and admire the meadow. We were feeling tired and great. We spread out in the grass and rested and swapped packs and strapped them on and were raring to go. Almost instantaneously, the grass ended and the boulders started. We got up on the first one, and from that point on, it was just a matter of jumping from boulder to boulder, gradually climbing 5 miles up a valley of boulders, getting steeper and steeper with immense crags on both sides, forming the walls of the valley, till near the cliff face we'd be scrambling up the boulders, it seemed. And what's behind that cliff face? There's high grass up there, shrubbery, scattered boulders, beautiful meandering creeks that have ice in 'em, even in the afternoon, spots of snow, tremendous trees, and one boulder just as big as 2 of Alva's cottages piled on top the other, which leans over and makes a kind of concave cave for us to camp at. Lighten a big bonfire that'll throw heat against the wall. Then after that, the grass and the timber ends. That'll be at 9,000, just about. With my sneakers, it was as easy as pie to just dance nimbly from boulder to boulder. But after a while, I noticed how gracefully Jaffy was doing it. And he just ambled from boulder to boulder, sometimes in a deliberate dance, with his legs crossing from right to left, and for a while I followed his every step, but then I learned it was better for me to just spontaneously pick my own boulders and make a ragged dance of my own. The secret of this kind of climbing, said Jaffy, is like Zen. Don't think. Just dance along. It's the easiest thing in the world, actually easier than walking on flat ground, which is monotonous. The cute little problems present themselves at each step, and yet you never hesitate, and you find yourself on some other boulder you picked out for no special reason at all, just like Zen, which it was. We didn't talk much now. I got tiresome on the leg muscles. We spent hours, about 3, going up that long valley. In that time it grew to late afternoon, and the light was growing amber, and shadows were falling ominously in the valley of dry boulders. And instead, though, of making you feel scared, it gave you that immortal feeling again. The ducks were all laid out easy to see. On top of a boulder you'd stand and look ahead and spot a duck, usually only 2 flat rocks on top of each other, making with one round, one on top, for decoration, and you aimed in that general direction. The purpose of these ducks, as laid out by all previous climbers, was to save a mile or 2 of wandering around in the immense valley. Meanwhile, our roaring creek was still at it, but thinner and more quiet now, running from the cliff face itself, a mile up the valley, in a big black stain. I could see in the grey rock, jumping from boulder to boulder and never falling, with a heavy pack is easier than it sounds. You just can't fall when you get into the rhythm of the dance. I looked back down the valley sometimes and was surprised to see how high we'd come, and to see further horizons of mountains now back there. Our beautiful trail-top park was like a little glen of the forest of Arden. The climbing got steeper, the sun got redder, and pretty soon I began to see patches of snow in the shade of some rocks. We got up to where the cliff face seemed to loom over us. At one point I saw Jaffy throw down his pack and danced my way up to him. Well, this is where we'll drop our gear and climb those few hundred feet up the side of that cliff, where you see there it's shallower, and find that camp. I remember it. In fact, you can sit here and rest your bishop, while I go rambling around there. I like to ramble by myself. Okay, so I sat down and changed my wet socks and changed a soaking undershirt for a dry one, and crossed my legs, and rested and whistled for about a half hour. A very pleasant occupation, and Jaffe got back and said he'd found the camp. I thought it would be a little jaunt to our resting place, but it took almost another hour to jump up the steep boulders, climb around some, get to the level of the cliff-face plateau, and there, on flat grass, more or less, hike about 200 yards to where a huge great rock towered over the pines. Here, now, the earth was a splendorous thing. Snow on the ground, in melting patches in the grass, and gurgling creeks, and the huge silent rock mountains on both sides, and a wind blowing, and the smell of heather. We forded a lovely little creek, shallow as your hand, pearl pure lucid water, and got to the huge rock. Here were old charred logs where other mountain climbers had camped. And where's Matterhorn Mountain? You can't see it from here, but pointing up the farther long plateau, and a scree gorge twisting to the right, around that, draw and up 2 miles or so, and then we'll be at the foot of it. Wow. Heck. Woo! That'll take us a whole other day. Not when you're traveling with me, Smith. Well, Ridery, that's okay with me. Okay, Smithy. And now, how's about we relax and enjoy ourselves and cook up some supper and wait for old Morley? So we unpacked our packs and laid things out and smoked and had a good time. Now the mountains were getting that pink tinge. I mean the rocks. They were just solid rock, covered with the atoms of dust accumulated there since beginninglessness time. In fact, I was afraid of those jagged monstrosities all around and over our heads. They're so silent, I said. Yeah, man. You know, to me, a mountain is a Buddha. Think of the patience, hundreds of thousands of years just sitting there, being perfectly silent and like praying for all living creatures in that silence and just waiting for us to stop all our fretting and fooling. Jaffe got out the tea, Chinese tea, and sprinkled some in a tin pot, and had the fire going meanwhile, a small one to begin with. The sun was still on us, and stuck a long stick tight down under a few big rocks, and made himself something to hang the teapot on, and pretty soon the water was boiling, and he poured it out, steaming into the tin pot, and we had cups of tea with our tin cups. I myself had gotten the water from the stream, which was cold and pure like snow and the crystal-lidded eyes of heaven. Therefore, the tea was by far the most pure and thirst-quenching tea I ever drank in all my life. It made you want to drink more and more. It actually quenched your thirst, and of course, it swam around hot in your belly. Now you understand the Oriental passion for tea, said Jaffe. Remember that book I told you about? The first sip is joy, the second gladness, the third is serenity, the fourth is madness, the fifth is ecstasy. Just about, old buddy. That rock we were camped against was a marvel. It was 30 feet high and 30 feet at base, a perfect square almost, and twisted trees arched over it and peeked down on us. From the base it went outward, forming a concave, so if rain came, we'd be partially covered. How did this immense son-of-a bitch ever get here? It probably was left here by the retreating glacier. See over there, that field of snow? Yeah, that's the glacier, what's left of it. Either that or this rock tumbled here from inconceivable prehistoric mountains we can't understand. Or maybe it just landed here when the friggin' mountain range itself burst out of the ground in the Jurassic upheaval. Ray, when you're up here, you're not sitting in a Berkeley tea room. This is the beginning and the end of the world right here. Look at all those patient Buddhas looking at us, saying nothing. And you come out here by yourself for weeks on end, just like John Muir, climb around all by myself, following quartzite veins, or making posies of flowers, or my camp, or just walking around naked singing, and cook my supper and laugh. Jeffy, I gotta hand it to you. You're the happiest little cat in the world, and the greatest, by God, you are. I'm sure glad I'm learning all this. This place makes me feel devoted, too. I mean, I have a prayer. Did you know the prayer I use? What? I sit down and say, and I run all my friends and relatives and enemies one by one in this, without entertaining any angers or gratitudes or anything. And I say, like Jaffe Ryder, equally empty, equally to be loved, equally a coming Buddha. Then I run on, say, to David O. Selznick, equally empty, equally to be loved, equally a coming Buddha. Though I don't use names like David O. Selznick, just people I know, because when I say the words equally a coming Buddha, I want to be thinking of their eyes. Like you take Morley, his blue eyes behind those glasses. When you think equally a coming Buddha, you think of those eyes, and you really do suddenly see the true secret serenity and the truth of his coming Buddhahood. Then you think of your enemy's eyes. That's great, Ray. And Jaffe took out his notebook and wrote down the prayer and shook his head in wonder. That's really, really great. I'm going to teach this prayer to the monks I meet in Japan. There's nothing wrong with you, Ray. Your only trouble is you never learn to get out to spots like this. You've let the world drown you in its horse shit, and you've been vexed, though, as I say, comparisons are odious. But what we're saying now is true. He took his bulgur rough cracked wheat and dumped a couple of packages of dried vegetables in and put it all in the pot to be ready to be boiled at dusk. We began listening for the yodels of Henry Morley, which didn't come. We began to worry about him. The trouble about all this, damn it, if he fell off a boulder and broke his leg, there'd be no one to help him. It's dangerous, too. I do it all by myself, but I'm pretty good. I'm a mountain goat. Me too, damn it. I wish he gets here soon. Let's ramble around and eat snowballs and drink water and wait. We did this, investigating the upper end of the flat plateau, and came back. By now the sun was gone behind the western wall of our valley, and it was getting darker, pinker, colder. More hues of purple began to steal across the jags. The sky was deep. We even began to see pale stars, at least one or two. Suddenly we heard a distant yodelay, and Jaffe leaped up and jumped to the top of a boulder and yelled, "Hoo! Hoo! Hoo!" The yodelay came back. How far is he? My God, from the sound of it, he's not even started. He's not even at the beginning of the Valley of Boulders. He can never make it tonight. What'll we do? Let's go to the rock cliff and sit on the edge and call him in an hour. Let's bring these peanuts and raisins and munch on 'em and wait. Maybe he's not so far as I think. We went over to the promontory where we could see the whole valley, and Jaffe sat down in full lotus posture, cross-legged, on a rock, and took out his wooden juju prayer beads and prayed. That is, he simply held the beads in his hand, the hands upside down with thumbs touching, and stared straight ahead and didn't move a bone. I sat down as best I could on another rock, and we both said nothing and meditated. Only I meditated with my eyes closed. The silence was an intense roar. From where we were, the sound of the creek, the gurgle and slapping talk of the creek was blocked off by rocks. We heard several more melancholy yodel-hees and answered them, but it seemed farther and farther away each time. When I opened my eyes, the pink was more purple all the time. The stars began to flash. I fell into deep meditation, felt that the mountains were indeed Buddhas and our friends, and I felt the weird sensation that it was strange that there were only 3 men in this whole immense valley. The mystic number 3. Nirman Nakaya, Samhogakaya, and Dharmakaya. I prayed for the safety, and in fact the eternal happiness of poor Morley. Once I opened my eyes and saw Jaffe sitting here rigid as a rock, and I felt like laughing. He looked so funny. But the mountains were mighty solemn, and so was Jaffe. And for that matter, so was I. And, in fact, laughter is solemn. It was beautiful. The pinkness vanished, and then it was all purple dusk, and the roar of the silence was like a wash of diamond waves going through the liquid porches of our ears, enough to soothe a man 1,000 years. I prayed for Jaffe, for his future safety and happiness, and eventual Buddhahood. It was all completely serious, all completely hallucinated, all completely happy. Rocks are space, I thought, and space is illusion. I had a million thoughts. Jaffe had his. I was amazed at the way he meditated with his eyes open, and I was mostly humanly amazed that this tremendous little guy who eagerly studied Oriental poetry and anthropology and ornithology and everything else in the books, and was a tough little adventurer of trails and mountains, should also suddenly whip out his pitiful, beautiful wooden prayer beads and solemnly pray there, like an old-fashioned saint of the deserts, certainly, but so amazing to see it in America with its steel mills and airfields. The world ain't so bad when you got Jaffes, I thought, and felt glad. All the aching muscles and the hunger in my belly were bad enough, and the surrounded dark rocks, the fact that there is nothing there to soothe you with kisses and soft words, but just to be sitting here meditating and praying for the world with another earnest young man. 'Twere good enough to have been born just to die, as we all are. Something will come of it in the milky ways of eternity, stretching in front of all our phantom, unjaundiced eyes, friends. I felt like telling Jaffe everything I thought, but I knew it didn't matter, and moreover, he knew it anyway, and silence is the golden mountain. Yodel-hee, sang Morley. And now it was dark, and Jaffe said, "Well, from the looks of things, he's still far away. He has enough sense to pitch his own camp down there tonight, so let's go back to our camp and cook supper." "Okay." And we yelled, "Hoo!" a couple of times, reassuringly, and gave up poor Morrill for the night. He did have enough sense. We knew. And as it turned out, he did, and pitched his camp wrapped up in his 2 blankets on top of the air mattress, and slept the night out in that incomparably happy meadow with the pond and the pines, telling us about it when he finally reached us the next day.